Well, let's bring in the former Prime Minister of Australia now, Scott Morrison. Scott, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time this morning during these troubled times. Now, you are a friend of Donald Trump's. Let's just start off with how you're feeling about it all this morning.
Well, I'm still incredibly disturbed and upset. I think of the obvious reactions. I was shocked yesterday, terribly saddened by all of this. This is an awful, violent thing that has occurred in a country which are great friends of ours. And my thoughts also went to the American people who are going through a very difficult time and will continue to in the months ahead.
Have you managed to get a word to Mr. Trump yet at all, Scott?
I've passed on a message through an intermediary. I mean, at this time, obviously, he's very focused on Milwaukee coming up, amongst many other things. But, you know, it's a difficult time, I'm sure, for his family. I thought Melania Trump posted something very, very meaningful overnight here in Australia. And, I mean, she makes the point that, you know, when people look at others as if they're some sort of dehumanised machine, then, frankly, anything is possible. And we see far too much of that when it comes to political debate, whether it's overseas or indeed here. People are just reduced to narratives that are shallow and superficial to suit other people's motives, and they're repeated in the media, of course. And, you know, we don't know much about who this shooter is. The motives are very unclear. But what we do know is that something terribly violent has occurred and a man has lost his life and a family is grieving. And this is a terribly sad and tragic event.
So do you think the current state of political discourse has had a role to play in this?
Well, we don't know. That's the point. We don't know the motive of the shooter. I mean, people can speculate, but as further details come out about the shooter, it becomes even less clear. What we do know is that he thought it was a reasonable thing to get up on a roof and try to kill him, and ended up killing someone else in the process. And you know, I think we have to be careful about the civility of our debate, and particularly the way people are dehumanised. And I mean, when you go back to, you know, the assassination of Ronald Reagan, I mean, John Hinckley did it to try and impress a movie star in Jodie Foster. I mean, there are disturbed people and they can be prompted into rather violent and terrible acts. And my dear friend Shinzo Abe was the victim of another such attack. So, you know, those in public life find themselves at great times of risk. And I was particularly moved by seeing the Secret Service agents as they huddled around him and put themselves in the way of another bullet. As someone who's, you know, experienced the support and security of those who do that job for a living, I'm just constantly in awe of their bravery.
What is the right approach to take the temperature down here? And can that even be achieved now?
Well, I'd be surprised if we see too much change in the hothouse of the political debate in the United States in the months ahead. It is a presidential election, and they are always hotly contested, and the temperature does rise. It rarely falls. I would hope that we would see less of the sort of extreme language. I mean, Donald Trump, when I hear him spoken of around the world, when I hear him spoken about here, is made out to be someone who's going to destroy life as we know it. I mean, it is so absurd. It is just absolutely ridiculous. Now, I know the man. I've worked with him. I've dealt with him. I wouldn't say I'm particularly close to him at a personal level, but you know, we met recently, and you know, he's someone who wants to do the right thing by his country, who has a different view about how that should be achieved to others. And the way I think he's demonised by his opponents, I think the way he's demonised in the media, I think is just, frankly, quite unhinged. And when you allow that sort of commentary to perpetuate, then it obviously creates very genuine risks. So I would hope that this would occur, that people would step back from that type of personalised, dehumanising type of political activity and focus on what the issues are. Cost of living, the security of the United States in particular and the world more generally. And obviously President Trump has a strong view about America not being taken for granted by his allies and partners as well as enemies and opponents. These are pretty reasonable points to be making, I would have thought.
Sure. Donald Trump, though, has used inflammatory language in the past. Does he or the Republicans have a role to play here in bringing the temperature down?
I think it is incumbent on everybody, both who is in political life and those who report on political life, those who commentate on political life, I think exercise that type of civility. That's what I would argue. We see it in this country. We see it in other Western democracies. It's not a good part. And you know what? It's used by our enemies. It's used by our opponents. The number of times I've heard, oh, this is the end of the US democracy, whether it's now or in the years past. Well, no, it's not. The US is a great democracy. They're an amazing nation, and they will continue to be the bastion of freedom around the world. And our opponents, I mean, you have President Putin today, who was saying that, this is showing the democracy's on the rocks. I'm sure similar views are being held in China and Tehran and North Korea. I think we need to be strident about the strength of our democracy, and I thought President Trump displayed that pretty clearly yesterday.
Okay, and just a final one here, Scott. As a former Prime Minister, are you concerned about that kind of attack ever potentially happening here, particularly as protesters target MP offices regarding the war in Gaza?
Oh, we can't be ambivalent to that risk, not at all. I don't think we can. I mean, we have different gun laws in this country and things of that nature, for which I'm very thankful, John Howard. But putting that one single issue to a side, we can't be complacent about it. And that's why I think, we should be taking the lessons of what has occurred here. But I'd stress again, we're not really sure what has occurred here. We know it was an assassination attempt. What motivated that ultimately could end up being a mystery. But at the same time, what we see is an elevation in someone's mind that violence was the answer to whatever was going through their head, and that is a terribly sad thing to have occurred, and tragically it has ended one person's life and destroyed their family.